To help finish up the formwork, I rented this sweet Rebar Bender, which allowed me to keep as many continuous sections as possible with multiple 60-degree bends. And this unit has a little adjustment slider, and if I adjusted that along with the bending anvil, I could get my spacing just right for those angles. In the last video, I finished up by test fitting the jet pipes, although I ended up cutting all those sections to length, but then I realized it would be better off installing the lower rebar first and some of the upright rebar before putting a huge mess of pipes in the way.
Another one of those days where you wake up and it is snowing 4 inches before you even do anything, so had to relocate the rebar bending operation under the deck in the garage. The snow was so pretty when I came out here, but now it's just a huge pain. But excited because the rebar is almost bent.
To save on the cost of renting this machine, I took all the measurements and just crushed through all the rebar sections. For the most part, we have partial hexagons for the horizontal layers and various L-shapes for the vertical uprights. Let me tell you, renting a machine like this is so much better than the ridiculous manual bender. After a few test pieces, everything could basically be marked and repeated quite accurately. So this rear deck slab serves as both a foundation for the tub surround deck, which will match the existing deck, and also a foundation for the retaining wall. And so these fixtures that I'm building here hold the rebar L's at just the right place to thread through the Allen block so that I can tie everything together by pouring some cement down the hollow blocks. I did a lot of batch building of the 12 jets and associated parts, and I think I'm completely overusing PVC for anything after this build because the fumes were just atrocious. Before placing the bulk of the rebar, I tied in the jet supply pipes from the trench feeds to the first 2 jet lines. This is what I'm doing there back behind all that formwork. As well as connecting the drain plumbing to the skimmer and adjusting its fit. In a few cases I applied heat to the pipes to get slight bends so that everything would fit correctly. Here's a better shot of the jet input pipes. The water is supplied below here. The air is available to the venturis from up here. And over here is the conduit and the form for the control panel. That foam is going to be removed once the pour is complete. Finally, it was time to start laying rebar. I built the bottom layer first, which was the most complicated as it had to thread around various pipes and fittings. Couple things here. One is, I know you're not supposed to heat rebar for bending purposes, but I only did this in a couple of locations to fit around the pipes. And also, these little MAP gas oxy torches are garbage. I went through 3 oxygen bottles to heat like 6 joints. 6 adjustments basically, and you know, I really miss my proper oxyacetylene setup back home. After putting the bottom rebar in place, I installed uprights to support the next layer. They're basically 2 rings around the walls of the tub and 3 levels of those rings. With the rebar about half finished, I moved on to plumbing for the jets. All the jet tubes are capped for the pressure test and then inserted into their positioning holes and zip tied to the retaining brackets. I worked around from the input tee we talked about earlier, adding pipe segments, then the elbows, then the waterway, poly jet body tees. I put a link in the description of those parts if you're interested. Then I would just repeat that until I was at the end of the run. And there was enough wiggle room between the 2 pipes that I could put the air and water pipes together at the same time. And once those tees were in place in front of the holes in the forms, I was able to glue in the jet pipe into the tee. The last bit of plumbing was to run the air input line out the side of the forms, and the inlet to that air system is going to be hidden under the deck. Alright, all the jet plumbing is roughed in. Man, there is quite a bit of plumbing involved in this hot tub. Actually, the real last bit of rough plumbing was finally joining the skimmer to its input and output pipes. The water runs from the floor drain up into the skimmer, and then off into the pump house. There are a lot of little adjustments just to get everything centered and mated to the forms and level. With the rough plumbing complete, I moved on to the upper layers of rebar, starting with the deck foundation grid. Then onto the upper rings of the tub wall rebar. I should mention also that there's this wire grid on top of the rebar that will add more strength to the walls and the seats. And this can also be considered the what's called an equipotential bonding grid, basically surrounding the whole body of water with a metal grid that's bonded to eliminate any stray voltages from the equipment coming back into the water and electrocuting the party goers. There are lots of final fitting and adjustments of the support rebar and wiring all the intersections together. Okay, all the rebar is completed for this foundation slab. As well as the tub wall rebar and the wiring grid. And here we have the bonding wire bonded to the rebar in 2 locations. There's the second one, and finally terminating at the bonding pipe right here. Quite a bit of work went into all of this stuff, which is really just going to end up covered in concrete. I think it looks pretty cool. Any guesses to what it looks like? Here's a hint. I showed it to my friend and he said,
"What a piece of junk!"
But I told him,
She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts. I've made a lot of special modifications myself.
Anyway, got one more shot here showing all the plumbing. And with that completed, I could move on to enclosing it with the exterior forms. Each panel was fitted and leveled with the inside wall. All this plywood is known as BBOES, or form grade plywood, and is actually oil impregnated to resist sticking to the concrete. It is still plywood though, so all the forms were reinforced with 2x4s and 6s. Around back there is a tiny suspended form that continues the hexagon around the outside of the tub, just above where the deck foundation level is. And so this is to support stonework, which is going to surround the top of the tub. I had to hold all these in place with strips to reach the right height and level while fitting all the components, and then had to support all of those with suspension boards, basically. So for that I made some custom angled boards that would clear the top of the formwork and also support the whole floating form in the back there. The last step was final prep for the pour, cleaning out all the debris inside the hole, reinforcing all the exterior forms with boards and trusses. And then I cleaned up the space and moved a bunch of stuff out of the way so we could get the concrete tube in there.
Just finished up all the forms ready for pour, and I'm really glad I reinforced that tent because it snowed a lot last night, and it's like 5 to 10 degrees out, so I don't know when we're going to do the concrete, but it is cold out here.